work through that. So let's work through. One of the pieces for today, if you'd like to connect, to Wi-Fi, yesterday, during the DigCit day, oh wait, did I hear something? Or did someone just cough? There's Joanne. Hi, Joanne. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, loud and clear.
Woo, yay, right on. Good deal. So Joanne, welcome. This is everybody. Everybody, this is Joanne Sweeney Burke. And I'm trying to catch Derek's eye in the back. I'll see if I can get him to come up. Derek wanted to take the opportunity to ask some questions. One of the core groups that we recognize has an extreme stake in digital citizenship is corporations. The United States and globally, business is important for our community. It's the way that commerce works. It's the way that we do business, and everyone has a stake. So as I invite Derek Larson to come up, talking with Joanne Sweeney Burke about corporate social responsibility.
Thank you. Sorry for the technology. For all the panelists that are coming virtually, if you'll mute as you come in, that'd be fantastic. All right. So welcome again. Lovely technology. That's the way it works, right? It works and doesn't work. But we're lucky. We're excited to have the one and only Joanne Sweeney Burke. Joanne is one of the most energetic and fun people I've met in my life. She's also one of the few Irish people I know, and this girl is incredible. She knows how to have fun and party, but she's also very serious when it gets down to work and business. She was a finalist on the Irish version of The Apprentice. She was like in the top, and it's because this woman knows business. She came literally from tragedy after tragedy after tragedy and has become a powerhouse in business, not only in Ireland, but with the entire European Union. She's done work all across the EU and continuously is working with many corporations in Europe over doing trainings at Google headquarters there in Ireland and across Europe. I mean, she knows what she's doing. She's incredibly powerful. So welcome, Joanne Sweeney Burke. So yes, let's do. So Joe, talk to us really quickly about some of the work you're doing. I mean, you've literally, I think every time I see your stuff, you're all over on a plane for this, on a plane for that, back and forth. What's going on with your work these days?
First of all, Derek, thank you so much for the amazing introduction. I do like a party, but I also love digital citizenship and digital marketing also. So I guess my career has always been in the sphere of communications, from starting off as a broadcast journalist to working in public relations, and then 10 years jumping exclusively into digital marketing, social media communications. I quickly realized that the skills deficit in Europe, which currently stands at 22% relating to digital skills, needed to be filled. And while all the conversations centered and people were completely preoccupied about how the internet and the smartphone generation is almost being corrupted by technology, I feared that those who were making decisions at the legislative level, at corporate level, and even at transnational level, didn't actually truly understand what they were making decisions around. So I guess you could say I made it my mission to step in. And you know, I'm from a small county in northwest of Ireland, and yeah, I've had a quite a bit of interesting upbringing and life in my personal life. But you know, and I know that this family of global leaders in the world of digital citizenship understand that when you have a mission and a calling, you follow it. So it all began about 5 years ago when my then daughter Sophie was about 15 years old, and I realized that she didn't understand the world of digital as much as I did, and I needed to support her. That led us to creating an online program called Young Minds Online, which we subsequently sold to Kaspersky Lab. So that was modules to help parents and to help young people. But again, I had this inkling and this niggling that the corporate world, the government world didn't really understand it. So I decided to investigate how much they understood. It led me to writing a book on how police forces are using social media communications, and then creating programs for public sector marketing professionals. So my mission right now is to work with those government professionals who, in my view, are changing the world one digital message at a time. But they need to understand when they communicate those digital messages, they're making a huge impact. And so I launched the Public Sector Marketing Pros program only about 8 weeks ago. I held Ireland's first Public Sector Digital Marketing Summit in June, which was oversubscribed, and I'm taking that event to Brussels in February next year. So my work in Brussels actually is working with the EPP group. They're the largest political grouping in the world. They found me on my podcast, The Power of Online and Technology and Storytelling. And I train MEPs, I train press advisors and social media assistants from 28 member states. And only a couple of days ago, I had a meeting with communications professionals from the European Council, the Commission and the Parliament, the three core institutions. And what they're saying to me, and it's reflected in other organizations and in other government bodies, is that the investment in skills, in knowledge, has not come forth. People know that social media and digital communications is there, but they're only now beginning to take it seriously. So for me, there's a lot of work to do. Derek mentioned Google. Interestingly, Google found me on Google last summer. They were looking to expand their team of trainers across Europe. And of course, knowing the world of the internet like I do, I came up in a search, and that has led me to work with international brands from across Europe. So I'm just on a mission to, as Marie-Alice and her team are on a mission, is to make sure that people understand how the internet can help all of us. But it's underutilized from a government perspective, and senior leaders are afraid. There are some political parties who are very good at leveraging digital communications, and some others are stepping back. And what we need now, in an era where fake news is commonplace, we need people's truths to rise to the top. And you can, to a large extent, control the internet. But when you have negative vices and people who have negative and really dangerous wishes when it comes to how they use the internet, we need the people in authority, the people that we're supposed to trust, in political and in government authority, to understand how the internet works. So that's currently my mission, and I'm looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have around digital citizenship, because by virtue of all of us being here on this global stage, we're certainly filling a gap.
Excellent. So let me ask you a quick question, though. So we're talking about corporations specifically at this point. What exactly do you see as a major role these corporations have when addressing digital citizenship and making sure that they are doing their part to be an active participant and not hindering the discussion or what's going on?
These corporations employ hundreds of thousands of people, probably millions of people if we think about the global stage. And what they're probably not doing so well is investing in digital citizenship in their people. We know that a corporation's best asset are their people. Their people are advocates for their products, for their brands, for their services online. Too often we're finding case studies where employees have stepped beyond the border and the line of, talking about perhaps confidential or proprietary information, and then HR are on their backs. But in my experience, when I'm looking at corporations, they don't have adequate policies in place. They have training for health and safety. So if you lift something heavy, so if you lift a box of paper for your photocopier, you get trained on how to bend down and lift that box. But you're actually not trained how to represent yourself, your professional self, or your corporation online. And the other thing to say is that a lot of corporations are still banning and preventing individuals from having a profile online. But we know that, you know, social media communications is a fundamental way in which we communicate. The other point that I would make is about transparency. In my view, the biggest currency online right now is trust. If corporations can get their customers, their stakeholders to elevate and to believe in what they do, they will fly, their people will fly. And how you gain that trust is about transparency and storytelling online. We know that if we have a gripe with an organization, customer service is not so much a call center anymore. Customer service is your Twitter account. And also having CEOs going front of screen. CEOs will always show up for the television cameras, but how about they show up for the people and leveraging technology to get their story out and go in front of screen when you can look at somebody down the lens and in the eye.
Excellent. So you mentioned trust as a major key factor here, and I think I agree with you 100%. Over in the EU, you guys have established the GDPR, and that's had major impacts across the internet for not only just your folks across the pond, but it's hitting worldwide. Do you see that as a step forward for positive digital citizenship work? Or is that actually could that end up being a hindrance to this movement? What are your thoughts?
So the conversations around GDPR were broad and varied and went on for 2 years before May 2018 when it came into force. I believe that GDPR is something positive. We should only be having conversations with people that want to have conversations with us. And the internet gets a bad name because of spam, right? But if you actually build your community, just like Marialis has done with Digital Citizen Institute, you actually are having conversations with people that want to hear from you. With GDPR right now, you have to have explicit consent to communicate with individuals. We've had to rewrite our policies, our terms of privacies, and we've had to be more open and overt. And again, that transparency. We've also seen Facebook and Google get into some hot water when it came to trust and transparency around their own businesses. I happened to be in the EU Parliament a number of months ago when Mark Zuckerberg was addressing MEPs, and I interviewed Manfred Weber, who was the chairman of the EPP group, the largest political grouping in the EU. And I asked him, I said, Manfred, you put it to Mark Zuckerberg that he was essentially operating a monopoly. Is this something that the EU care about? Because we know that the EU has very strong anti-competition laws. And he said, well, he didn't really answer the question, but we want to make sure that the people and that the citizens have fair opportunity and choice when it comes to online platforms and channels. We know that Google and Facebook are the Goliaths of the internet, and they largely control our activity, because if we're not on search, we're certainly on social. And we know that Facebook own WhatsApp and Instagram and many other assets as well. So trust and transparency is really important. The EU Commission came out last week to say that they were going to input 4% of a company's revenue as a fine if they did not bring down terrorist-related information off their platforms within 60 minutes. Moderation is a big issue. So you can see that whole transparency, that whole trust conversation is one that is current. And if corporations aren't putting their best transparent foot forward, then their credibility may reduce. And of course, legislators in Europe are certainly looking at that as a key factor.
Okay, excellent. So you mentioned about the customer service is no longer a call center, but it's actually more of the social accounts, the Twitter accounts, the Facebook accounts. In 30 seconds, what is one thing that we can do as consumers that can actually help us help these corporations step up? What do you think is one thing we can do to help them step up and actually be a better member of this digital society?
I think we can create a wave of recommendations and positivity, and letting these corporations know that we, as their advocates and as their service and product users, that we will help them. And once they're transparent and have two-way conversations with us, we will respond. And I think that you guys are well placed to maybe encourage more of us to do that.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time, Joanne. If you'd want to stay in here and continue listening, we'd love to have you there. We're going to move on here in just a moment, but thank you. I want to thank Joanne specifically for coming in, and thank you so much.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Joanna. Our next part of our panel I want to take a look at is looking at digital citizenship from the perspective of global connections. Dr. Sarah Thomas, as she says, is like the Wizard of Oz of EduMatch. She is the front and she's the behind the curtain. If we were to describe Sarah in 6 words, she would say connection is the foundation of life. So with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Sarah Thomas, please.
Thank you. Hey, good morning. Thank you all so much. So I just wanted to start off by giving shout outs. So Bronwyn Joyce and Kemi, they're not able to join us today, but we definitely want to say hello to them and to thank them. So I'm just going to talk to you all about just 4 initiatives about connecting globally. There are so many out there. I want to definitely highlight 4 that I have had the pleasure of being part of. The first one, which we will talk about a little later, is Global Maker Day. So we have Jamie Donnelly in the back, and we are going to be talking about Global Maker Day a little bit more at length, but it's coming up on October 23rd. A great way to involve not only us as educators, community members, parents, but most importantly, our students. In addition, there is an ed camp that we do every year. Has anyone in here ever been to an ed camp? Just a quick show of hands. All right, cool. So I'm seeing a lot of hands go up about ed camps, but if you don't know about ed camps, what they are free, participant-driven professional learning opportunities for educators. And at these ed camps, then the beauty about it is that you just bring what you want to talk about. There's no predetermined sessions, just everyone shows up the day of, and literally you have a blank wall. And you sign up, you say, hey, I want to talk about digital citizenship during the first session. So you sign up for that, and then people come and they talk to you about it. No one's talking at you. It's a conversation where everyone's involved, everyone's learning from one another. You're free to ask questions, you're free to share whatever you have done. So I love ed camps, huge fan of ed camps. So one of the ones that we do is called Ed Camp Voice. We hold it on a platform called Voxer. Quick show of hands if any of you have used Voxer. Great, so Voxer is a walkie-talkie app. It's freemium, and what it allows you to do is have conversations with groups of up to 500 people. I'm probably going to date myself with this reference, but have y'all ever seen the commercial around the turn of the century? Oh gosh, it feels so old, right? But around the turn of the century with, I think it was Nextel or something like that, where it would say, chirp, chirp, where are you? And people would respond. Do y'all remember that? Yeah, so Voxer is like that, except that it holds these conversations so that you can listen to them asynchronously. And this is beautiful because what it does is that you can have conversations with people from literally all over the world. We have people in our EduMatch Voxer group from the Philippines who are 12 hours ahead of Eastern Standard Time. However, we're able to have these conversations. I have a very good friend who I talk to almost on a daily basis sometimes, who lives over on that side of the world. So we have these tools at our disposal, which are just excellent. So bringing it back to Ed Camp Voice on Voxer. We have an Ed Camp, and this Ed Camp is the only one where you can literally be in every single room if you want to be. So we have different people signing up to facilitate conversations on different topics. You just click on the link and add yourself to the room and have these conversations. And a lot of them go on and on and on. It's usually a day-long event, but a lot of people elect to keep them open after the fact. So we have rooms that have been going on since the very first Ed Camp Voice, which was called Ed Camp Voxer at the time. For example, AR, VR, and EDU. So shout out to Jamie Donnelly, who was there with our virtual reality room, which then evolved to AR, VR, and EDU. So there's groups like that. There's a restorative justice group. There's a personalized learning group. So many different conversations from educators just learning and growing together on their own time. So Ed Camp Voice, just wanted to also give a shout out to Regina Schaefer, who is very instrumental in keeping that community thriving, as well as Carrie Hennessy Wilson. So that is Ed Camp Voice. Another shout out that I would like to give is to Ed Change Global. So at Change Global, I know that Jamie's going to be mentioning them a little later on, but they are a fantastic group of people who hold this event that goes on every July, where you have people from literally all over the world signing up for all of these different events to share, again, what they know. And their numbers are through the roof in terms of how many people are just interested in these opportunities, sharing, learning, and growing together. So the very last one that I want to talk about, and I'm going to talk a little bit at length, so hopefully y'all don't get sick of hearing this, but I'll tell you a little bit about EduMatch, which is an organization that I founded. It started back in 2014, and it literally was a conversation on Voxer with a friend of mine who used to teach math. She was a math specialist. And she said, I want to do this gamification thing with math. I want to gamify my math classroom. I want to make it like fantasy sports. So I said, that's funny, because I was having the exact same conversation with my cousin who used to teach math in New York. You and him need to get together and talk shop and talk to this other mutual friend of ours. And, you know, we're just going to rock this math gamification thing out. And I stopped for a second. I said, wait a minute. Is there anything out there that connects people in this way, that knows like what you're into and just makes these direct connections? Yes, there's Twitter chats. Yes, there are Voxer groups. But is there anything that will be like a matchmaking service, quote unquote, right? Everyone always thinks that it's like Match.com for educators. It's not a dating site, I assure you. So at that point, then I said, okay, let me put a search out. Didn't see anything. So I just set up a Twitter account, edu_match, because EduMatch was taken, and put out a tweet. And I believe that it said, and this is a paraphrase, this idea is kind of dumb, but it might totally work, so let's give it a shot. So I put out a little bit more about what we were trying to do. And within maybe about the span of 10 minutes, someone from Australia tweeted back right away. He said, it sounds really interesting. I'd like to give it a shot. I said, okay, tell me a little bit about yourself. So he told me, you know, what he was into. I went to a list of hashtags that's online, and I started like putting out tweets with all of his interests, hashtagged. And at the end of the day, I checked back with him. I said, how did it go? And he said, I met so many people. You should keep this going. So I said, okay. Spoke with my original friend who I was talking to before. She said, you know what? You need a website and you need a form so that people can sign up for this, like make this legit. And I said, all right, sounds good. So set up the website, set up the form, tweeted it out there. And next thing you know, we have this wonderful lady in the audience, Julie Smith, who was the first person to fill it out. And she was our first official person of the day. And from that, the list has grown. It has grown. Now we have over 1,000 people. We have created a database where people can sort by their interest, and you know, everyone has opted in. So let's say that you want to talk more about digital citizenship and you want to find someone who identifies digital citizenship as their interest. You just go to the website, you go to our databases, awesome table of EduMatch, and you just search for digital citizenship, and boom, it'll give you a list back. It'll show you where these people are, how to get in touch with them. And I mean, that's just been a great project, but it didn't stop there. That's the thing. As people signed up, they brought their ideas with them. This kind of speaks to the power of the community. So one person signed up and said, hey, why not start a Voxer group? I said, okay. Next thing you know, Voxer group is on and popping. Somebody else said, hey, why not do a Twitter chat and a podcast? Okay, we did that. Next thing you know, Tweet and Talks is born. Somebody else said, hey, let's have an EdCamp. Next thing you know, EdCamp EduMatch is born. Bunch of people, all of a sudden, we were talking one day about a bucket list, about our educator bucket list. And what is your goal? Like, what would you like to knock off of your bucket list? I want to be an author. I want to be an author. I want to be an author. So the next logical step was what? Let's write a book, right? So that is when EduMatch Snapshot in Education began in 2016. We had 20 educators from all over the world submitting a chapter about what a snapshot in education looked like. It went so well that we continued with the 2017, and you'll see chapters in there by Mary Alice and by Derek. We're doing our 2018 version. We also started doing a teacher recipe guide. And then people started showing interest in publishing their own books, solo books. So we started doing that in April. Now, the next iteration is that we have started a nonprofit with the goal of supporting and amplifying and possibly funding grassroots projects. educators around the world, educators and students. So that is where we're looking ahead. We are definitely in the soft launch process of that. So looking forward to seeing where it goes and what will be the next step. So we'll see what our community needs of us and what our community wants of us, and that's where we will go. So that's EduMatch in a nutshell. And just there's so many opportunities for global collaboration. So definitely take advantage of them, and let's continue to learn and grow together. So thank you all so much.
Cool, thanks, Sarah. Appreciate it. Global collaborations, global connection is at the heart of digital citizenship. There are lots of other ways that people have been connecting. Probably, and at this time, I'd like to bring up Dr. Kurt Jefferson and Dr. Ralph Algas, representing on the panel from the classroom to the boardroom, higher education and the role that higher education plays, specifically in the context of digital citizenship.
Thank you very much. I'm Kurt Jefferson from Spalding University. I wanted to introduce my colleagues on the panel of this part, Dr. Eileen Winkauer, who's with us from Kuwait, and Dr. Ralph Algas here, Learning Technology and Education at Webster University. We're going to go in this order, and we're going to each take a few minutes, start with Dr. Winkauer, then myself, and then Dr. Algas.
Forgot to unmute myself. I hope everybody can hear me.
Yes.
I'm here from Kuwait, and hopefully we don't have a dust storm on its way, because I just received a WhatsApp message that's what's going to happen. So it's probably good that I'm going first, because you never know about the internet connections once that happens. Talking about the digital citizenship and the internet in Kuwait. I am the director of foundation program at one of the private universities here in Kuwait. And I deal with the students, most of them are coming just from high school. And the assumption here, because most of them have multiple digital devices, is that they're very savvy about the internet, they're very savvy about all types of uses of apps and so forth. But truthfully, they really just know what they know. So we have to make sure that we're not assuming that they're very savvy about, for instance, attaching documents to emails or even checking their emails on a regular basis, because their normal form of communication is WhatsApp, Snapchat, Instagram, and so forth. So when students first come into the department, we have to make sure that they're at least aware of how to use some of the basics. And one of the majors that we offer at the university, once the students get out of our program, is computer science. And I know that they also have some courses on ethics and so forth, to make sure that students realize when they're putting together websites, they are doing it in an ethical manner. So, as I said, students have a high level of access. Those outside the university have a high level of access. We have 4G here. In the region in general, internet is not a problem. Wi-Fi and satellite access for internet is not a problem. But the problem is really, how do we teach students, or how can students understand how their voices are heard on the internet? So for instance, I follow a number of Instagram accounts that are run by young Kuwaitis, young expats, foreigners who have their own businesses, and that's a very good way for them to advertise. What happens is many times that the replies are less than polite, and so you know, how do you? We need to make sure. Do we need to ensure that students, that the young people, that even adults are aware of what are the parameters, how to have a conversation on the internet. So a lot of it is communication, how to have good good communication, how to communicate well, get your point across, but do it in a respectful, polite manner. So there's a lot. I've talked to Mary Alice about this. There's a lot that we could do to make sure that digital citizenship in Kuwait and the region is something that we're focusing on. We don't often hear about it. In the past year or two, we've had adults who've gotten themselves into trouble with the law because of comments they've made on Twitter. And so how do we educate our young people to make sure that they don't get into those situations? So there's a wide range of things that we really need to discuss from early ages. The other thing that's really interesting, and I think that Kurt is going to mention it also, is this whole idea of online degrees and online courses. In Kuwait, it's a very big thing because there have been people who have known to have taken courses or degrees that weren't necessarily from trusting sources, from actual programs that were rigorous. And as a result, because there really isn't any accreditation process, there's no way for Ministry of Higher Education to tell whether those courses were taken through a rigorous program. No online degrees are recognized in Kuwait. Nobody offers online degrees here. If you try to get a job with an online degree, it's impossible. If you've taken online courses as part of your degree, it's considered like distance learning, or and it's if they find out that part of your degree was through online courses. So there's a lot of education that needs to be done here. I know I only have a few minutes, so I just don't want to take any longer to make sure that that Kurt and Ralph have time to talk about their perspectives. But you know, I'm happy to take questions later on about any of these particular topics or things in particular in regards to higher education in Kuwait and in the Gulf region and the Middle East.
Thank you, Eileen. Appreciate that very much. I'm going to talk a little bit, and I'm going to hunch over here so they can hear me across the ocean. I'm going to talk a little bit about online, as Eileen alluded to. I just went to a university. I've been there 9 months in Louisville, Kentucky, after spending 30 years in higher ed here in Missouri at several institutions. I'm a political scientist by training. Joanne will be glad to hear it, and she already knows. I Skyped with her a few years back. My area is European politics, European Union, and Russian politics. But I've stepped into the grad dean position at the university I'm at, learning a lot about advanced higher education. One thing, I'll give you a statistic that ties directly into this, and that is 20% of graduate students today have told us that they want to do their papers, write their papers in grad school on their phones. So we're seeing, for what most of us who come out of a baby boomer or right post-baby boomer era, we're seeing some transformations that are mind-blowing, you know, even to many of us. To the millennials and even the post-millennials, not a big deal. World universities are really moving online. 15% of the globe now is taking courses online. In the United States, 3 million high school graduates graduated last year. That's the entire market for 1,700, 2,000 colleges, universities. 36 million adults are looking at higher ed online and will never set foot on a campus. Now, only 4, 5, 6 million of those will be matriculated this year. This is something that is radically changing the landscape of higher education. Digital ed is more accessible, and it's also being more accessible for, in the diversity sense, for minorities, students of color, etc., which in many cases haven't had the opportunities. I teach at an urban university, much like Webster, and we have the highest percentage of minority students in the state of Kentucky, a state in America of about 4.4 million people. And our institution is small, a little over 2,000, 45% grad students, 22% minority students. The negative in all of this is that only 54% of the world, as many of you know, have access to the internet. That's over 3 billion people who do not enjoy, as I call, the PhD in the pocket that has more information stored on it than all the information I learned in graduate school. I think the future is looking at what young adults need. I'm talking about high school, gymnasium, the secondary level, and I think some of the things, you look at the trends, more AI is coming into higher education. That's going to be something that we'll have to think about. I'm in an institution that's heavily healthcare oriented in terms of our graduate programs. Too bad we couldn't hear from Felipe. We have a big occupational therapy school that deals with assistive technologies. You're going to see AI in nursing. I know at Spalding we have in the development AI in terms of teaching students, for example, undergrad and masters, how to give shots through virtual reality. So real basic things. Louisville is one of the biggest healthcare centers. There's research going on right now. We have a Cardio Innovation Institute, which is a partnership with hospitals and the University of Louisville. And we have there PhDs, MDs, postdocs, undergrads, and grad students. And they also in the lab there have reached out to high school students. Nobody has a monopoly on brains. And bringing high school students in, we found, or they found, that there's creativity at those levels. And that's the thing that, you know, when I talk with Mary Alice and look at the creativity that's going on in the digital citizenship work that she and her team are doing and all the colleagues are doing, this is helping young people get an advanced knowledge. What's interesting about that particular Innovation Institute, they have a 3D printer doing bioprinting of internal organs, and of course it's partly tied to the heart research as well. And these have been taken up on the space shuttle to test in outer space. So from the digital world to the Cardiovascular Institute to all levels of students working together, tied together. One thing that I see is the university curriculum may not meet the needs in the future or currently of what this generation needs that are working in the digital space and time. So that's something where today you're seeing majority of students wanting to have online courses. They're not interested anymore, not all, but they're not as interested in SEEK because they're finding that the assessments, the quality, etc. of online courses are good. I'm not saying that in-seat isn't good. We have several programs at my school that are hybrid. Things are moving that way. So the upshot for me is this movement started by Mary Alice, and I was going to give a shout out to Curran D, my friend, because I wanted to put on a digital citizenship kids bracelet today, her son. But what she started is beyond using online platforms responsibly. It's engulfing, as Joanne said, governments, higher ed institutions. And this is a positive revolution. I know something about revolutions. I've taught Russian politics for years and other kinds of things. And then the other things, as all you know, higher ed is in the throes of change. Market correction, digital platforms are here, and it's going to continue to change. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ralph Oligas from Webster University, and I've been in higher ed for 37 years, mainly as an educational technologist. So I've seen all these changes. When I first started, there was those things called punch cards, if you ever remember those. It keeps moving along the way. And so what I've heard several of my colleagues say over the last hour or so yesterday, and I'm sure some of them are going to say in the future, I'm going to try and summarize a few things. So if you walk away with here just with a few key points, you'll have it. I call them the 3 keys. One is infrastructure, second is mobility, and third is standardization. Infrastructure. That ability to be able to have coverage and capacity, to be able to connect access points, bandwidth, so that it can stream whatever we're trying to seek. You know, like here, we've had an issue with some connectivity with certain people. They've talked about, like Eileen just talked about, the dust storm possibly coming. So it interferes in terms of access points, depending on even if you have a very good network, what is happening. So one is infrastructure, meaning coverage and capacity. A second is mobility, whether it's tablets, it's phones, etc. In terms of the phone, about 10 years ago, I was visiting here in St. Louis an exhibit, a special exhibit at the Art Museum. And I asked the guard, I said, what is a balustrade? Because I didn't know what that meant in the art picture. And at the point, he didn't have a clue. The friend I was visiting with and I went to the boathouse for lunch. We're sitting there, and something made me think of, hey, pull out the phone, check the internet. Now, again, this is 10 years ago. Check the internet and look up balustrade. At that point, I knew what the definition meant and knew what's possible. The advantage to the mobility, whether it's a cell phone or it's an iPad or whatever, is the just-in-time learning, that instantaneousness. Now, today, I wouldn't think twice. Just pull out my phone, Google it, and find the information. But if you look back over time, and 10 years ago, about 2007, 2008, these were first coming in, and changing from a flip phone to a smartphone was just taking over. And so the third thing is to be able to standardize on something, standardization. And I don't care what the platform is, but the standardization allows you to create professional development so that all the teachers get that information at one point in time. So it makes that easier. So again, the three key points: infrastructure being coverage and capacity, second, mobility, just-in-time learning, and third, some type of standardization to help for professional development. I'm not saying what the platform should be. It could be a choice among your teachers. It could be different platforms. But if they all agree, it makes professional development, makes training a lot easier. A couple of things, and I don't know if they'll have the slides up or not, but one of it is they talk about TPAC from ISTE. And TPAC is a concentric circle. There it is. It has 3 points: technology, content, and the third one is pedagogical. If we do any one of those three in isolation, it doesn't make sense. It's really where they intersect that's important. What is the content you want that student to learn? What is it they want to learn? How are you going to teach it? And third, what technology makes sense? I also do an assistive technology course for our students who want to be teachers. And in that assistive technology, we talk about low tech, mid tech, and high tech. And the fourth one is no tech. What is it you need for that student to be able to do? And which one is the right choice? And technology is great, but if you can't use it, or if it's just a gizmo, it doesn't make sense. If you find the right technology to help the learning, in terms of the pedagogy, what you're trying to do, to influence the content. And then the last thing I'd like to do, if we flip the slide, this was a poster. In fact, I just got mailed this poster by ISTE about 3 days ago. And I thought, oh, this is important. It fits right in, digital citizenship, from their poster, and this is a picture of it. And the 7 things that are on that poster are kind of important, and we've hit them already in some way. It's more than just online safety, what we're talking about for digital citizenship. Yes, online safety is important, but it's more than just that. It's engaging respectfully, and that's what Eileen just said a few moments ago. It's making your voice heard, having students make their voice heard. I teach an online course for undergraduates as part of our Gen Ed program at the end on social technology, social movements. And so it's part of it is, how do you get your voice heard out there, okay? Another one is determining the validity of online sources. Is that accurate? Is what that other person's saying? Is it fake? Is it from a different point of view that may not have all the facts? How do you choose what's correct? Another one is connecting globally, which we're just doing right here today. Another one is being positive. You heard Eileen mention that, being positive. And the last one is being able to fail and learn. If the student doesn't try, they don't learn anything. Go out there, fail. I learn more by failing and then learning what the mistake is, and then I don't fail again, at least not in that aspect. I fail in many other ways, but not that aspect. So again, just to reiterate, more than just online safety, engaging respectfully, making your voice heard, determining the validity of your sources, connecting globally with other people, and then being positive and being able to fail and learn. Those are the things I'd like to leave you with today in terms of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Digital citizenship is multi-stakeholder. The next stakeholder group we would love to have be led through is parenting. Parenting in the digital age is incredibly important. I have four kids of my own, and just because I'm a teacher doesn't mean I always get it right, especially being an instructional technology coordinator. I'd like to invite up Jeremy Bond to help facilitate talking with Maria Zabala. If there were 6 words that Maria said she would use to describe herself, Maria said, "I try, so I may achieve." I think a lot of us can say, "I try," and that's an important piece for us. So invite Jeremy to come forward and talk about the stakeholder perspective of digital parenting. We can, well, if we can, Maria, go first. Good morning, Maria. How are you?
I'm fine. Do you all hear me okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't you go ahead and go first?
I go first?
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. Well, first I want to say thank you to everyone who's there, to Mary Alice and her team for organizing this, and to everyone who's attending. I find that the Institute and these summits are really helpful for everyone, but mostly for parents, because at least in Spain, it's not that usual to gather different kinds of people talking about these issues at the same place. You do have a lot of events of teachers talking to teachers, stakeholders talking to stakeholders, parents talking to parents, experts talking to experts on, law or cybersecurity. Then you don't gather different people to talk about this. And these digital parenting stuff has a lot of different layers, and you need to know a little bit about all of them in order to try to raise nice people who happen to live in a technological world. I was just giving a conference this morning at a congress here in Bilbao, which is a city in the north of Spain, and there were a lot of parents. And when I started giving my talk, they said, we've listened to all kind of different experts saying that we have to, raise our kids in self-esteem, being self-reliant, being respectful, being creative, being safe. Why don't you try and tell us how to do it? Which I found extremely challenging, because I was the last one to talk, so I couldn't say no. But the thing is that apart from doing everything I do, I am a mom to 3 kids who challenge me daily when it comes to the digital. And it's not only the thing is that I think we all have the same problem. It doesn't matter if we're in Ireland with Joanne, or Kuwait with Eileen, or in the US, in South America, Spain, the rest of Europe. We all have the same concerns. We all hear the same kind of headlines. So we end up being extremely fearful. And so we don't really act, more like we react to that fear, which we don't do in the rest of parts of the education we give to our kids. I always try to share a message of normalizing technology, which doesn't mean let the kids do whatever they want with their devices. It means integrating tech into the rest of the education we give to our kids, which should be, I guess, based on values and habits, and yes, respect, and acknowledging your own flaws and talents, and trying to know yourself and where you stand, and what kind of things you can do to make things better. But we have the same problems. It doesn't matter where we live. But it concerns me that there are very different stages in this way of approaching things. Maybe in the United States, you're lucky and you're overcoming the dangers narrative, but it's very hard to fight against that. Every time I hear Joanne, I think that there's a big responsibility in governments to try and release information that is not only based on, hey, parents, this is also dangerous. What are you going to do to protect your kids? Because nobody does that with the rest of things. You try to educate or to raise kids on healthy habits, eating habits, but it doesn't mean that you can't have a burger from time to time. And you try to have them practice sports, but at the same time, there are moments in which you can just sit on your couch and watch TV for a while, because that's funny too. So we need to find a balance. And what I love about the summits and what I love about Mary Alice is that we have to change parents in my case, the way we see our task in raising kids right now, not focusing on dangers and not focusing on guarantees. We seem to ask absolute questions. When is the right moment to give your kid a cell phone? When should I let my kid have a profile on social media? What can I do to avoid grooming or bullying or sexting? And you seem to need an absolute answer. And I don't think we ask for the same kind of thing in the rest of areas in life. You teach them, if you live in a city, I live in Madrid, there are a lot of cars. So both the school and me, we talk to the kids about, respecting traffic lights, watching before you cross the street, holding my hands when you're young, and then I'll have to trust you to not cross or to look twice. But we don't do that with technology. And I think that we really have to make an effort in normalizing tech, including it in the rest of value-based and positive-based education that we give our kids.
Thank you. Yeah, what I really appreciate is you're mentioning it all from a positive angle, which is kind of why I'm here. Because as a parent, I find that when digital issues are raised in the schools and in other environments that include parents and kids, that these are sessions that are often led by police officers, which almost always actually, and that kind of sends a message when we should be talking about learning, not about not about regulating or not about kind of tamping down. But I want to back up a little bit and mention what Parent Camp is. So I'm on the board of Parent Camp, which you heard Sarah Thomas talk about ed camps. Parent Camp uses the same framework as ed camps, but the idea is to bring parents in the room along with mostly educators that tend to be at ed camps. So parent camps have the goal of bringing schools, families, and communities together to talk about how we can improve education. So that's just wanted to mention what Parent Camp was. So being up here and talking about digital citizenship from a parent angle certainly goes along with that. When I learned that I was going to be talking about parenting in the digital age, I thought, we tend to have these conversations among adults and we tend to worry a lot, but we don't sit down with our kids and talk about it. So the first thing I did was mention to my 13-and-a-half-year-old, what I'm doing today. And so she came up with some things to say. And I thought it makes perfect sense to talk from the youth angle. So the first thing she said, and I wanted to make sure I got it right, so I wrote it down, was that letting your kids have social media shows them that the kids have earned the parents' trust. It shows that you believe in their independence, gives them responsibilities. And she said kids want their parents to trust them, which I thought was really interesting. And but she then acknowledged that then we, meaning herself and other kids, have to then earn that trust. And she said that parents having social media allows parents to relate and know what they're talking about with kids. So in other words, not keep it as kind of a distance, but being part of that world. She reminded me that we'd done chats together. So there'd been a couple of instances when I was on a Twitter chat, which I love, I'm on them all the time. And I had her kind of chime in with me. It reminded me too that often parents can feel like they're in a position of weakness because kids are on there and they're kind of, we think of them as savvy with it, but the citizenship elements are what we're experts on. So we shouldn't consider ourselves like in the lesser position than they are. We should remind ourselves that we are still the parent. So since we are the parent, that means guiding them to ultimate independence, establishing ground rules and expectations. There are some parent-child contracts that some parents use when their child gets a device. So my role as a parent, I tend to, because I'm so involved in lines, because I'm so engaged online, that's modeling with primarily from an educational standpoint, primarily on Twitter. I'm modeling, my daughter sees that, and eventually my younger daughter will you know, be part of that world as well. What they see is kind of what is the most important thing. And so when we talk about parenting the digital age, it's less about what we know versus what they know and what we can all do together to model. And one more thing. I thought about the fact that, I don't know about all of you out there, but I find that kids are really well aware of these YouTube celebrities, and I have no idea who these people are, but to them, they're, you know, they're as famous as any Hollywood celebrity. And we see that as kind of this foreign world to us. But then I thought, you know, it's just that we are part of different worlds. So we have our own, for those who are on education Twitter, we have our own influencers. And so we have the same thing. We have the same celebrity outlook about developing a persona online. We just do it in a different way. And I think there's just like on YouTube, there's positives and negatives of that. So when we're talking about being parents in the digital age, it's really about realizing the parallels between our lives and their lives online. And it's not as different as we think. So thank you for that. And I'm glad I had her go first. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Milena. Appreciate you working through. It's interesting, Common Sense Media just came out with another round of research. And with regards to parenting, interesting what some of the research found was actually that students recognize that their parents are probably worse digital citizens than they are. One of the things that the researchers found was that kids often commented in the research that they behaved better than their parents sometimes, that they had a harder time. They wanted their parents to put the device down. So parenting today is a real challenge. So the multi-stakeholder approach, as we work from the classroom to the boardroom. Thank you for working through the parenting piece. I would like to invite forward Jamie Donnelly to talk about the idea of merging technologies, and particularly app development. And she will introduce you to some other folks as well. Would encourage you, if you haven't had a chance to do so yet, there are 2 hashtags that encourage you. If you tweet or use social media today using the hashtag DigCitSummit hashtag or the DigCit Weekend hashtag, would encourage you to use those. Without further ado, Ms. Jamie Donnelly. Jamie.
Well, I am fortunate to be able to introduce to you 2 people here that I collaborate regularly with. This is Milena and Michael. I'll let them introduce themselves a little bit more. But we are really passionate about immersive technology, so augmented, virtual, and mixed reality, looking at what that looks like in the classroom and education. And we're really fortunate to have a partnership and a collaboration where it's not just a company making decisions for classrooms, but it's a company actually asking for information and feedback back from the people that bring it into the classrooms and from students. So getting that feedback and that collaboration is really key. And so I'm going to go ahead. Well, first off, I am fortunate to meet with them. I am an independent consultant. I run AR, VR, and EDU, and have had a chance to just collaborate with many educators around the world, as well as companies that bring this topic. Now I'll go ahead and let Milena and Michael go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Milena. It's very nice that you have us here. And Michael?
Yep. Hi, I'm Mike, and we are Shapes, and we are the team behind Shapes, and we are making 3D geometry apps in such a way that, as Jamie said, feedback and collaboration with educators is really key to us, because they know their how you teach. They know their students best. So that's how we mainly work.
Yeah, so our main mission is to bring educational technology to the classroom to better address abstract problems like 3D geometry, as we do. So basically our responsibility is to create the apps that teachers, children, and sometimes parents feel comfortable with. So we put apps in hands of children and teachers to shape the future of the students, of the children. So we try to make it in the way that really solve their problems. So our main challenge is to connect with parents, is to connect with teachers and students. So we gather valuable insight from teachers about problems they face in the classroom in terms of 3D geometry. And we started in Poland. We started gathering from our local teachers, but we soon realized that the problems we are facing, that problems are global. So it's really important that when we are talking about the challenges like spatial reasoning when teaching 3D geometry, it's a global problem. So we face it and we collaborate with teachers around the globe, and we solve these problems with technology.
Yep. Yeah, and we figure out that immersive technology as part of emerging technologies, especially augmented reality, can be a solution to that understanding. That's something especially young adults know without knowing that. They know augmented reality from apps like Snapchat and stuff like that. They are using it, and with using AR, augmented reality in the classroom, they might feel like experts there, because they're using it daily, on a daily basis. And AR helps us and students to bring digital objects into the real world, like on your own desk or hand. And just an iPad can turn into a window students can look through.
Yeah, so our main challenge, apart from connecting globally with teachers and students and parents, was also to find the right technology, so the technology they feel comfortable with. So our mission is to understand the broader audience. So we don't follow our assumptions, we create what is needed. So we co-create these apps with teachers, and we put them in the hands of students. So our first challenge and the main key value from here is the co-creation, so that any teacher, any parent, any student that knows the problem, and the teachers know the problems the best. Sometimes these are parents that know the problems, sometimes students, it's difficult for students to even understand what's the problem, but we need to co-create with them. So we need to co-create with you. Here we created, some time ago, we created the community for Shapes. So it's called the Shapes 3D Geometry Learning Community on Facebook. So we can collaborate, we can co-create with teachers, we can collect their feedback, because we only know the technology. We can solve the problems together, but the teachers and students, parents are the people that know the problems the best. So we don't want to follow our assumptions. We want to listen.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of squeeze something in here in the collaborations that we have. That when me and Mary Alice, when we were collaborating initially, I think we saw our worlds kind of separate. Like, oh, you're into immersive tech, well, I'm into digital citizenship. And it was kind of like we were on our own little paths. And it was really Mary Alice who was like, no, like these paths cross all the time. And it was really, I mean, we're seeing that now, more than we did years ago when we first started connecting. But it was just an amazing thing to see, you know what, social media is becoming 360. We're not learning and communicating anymore through this little 2D screen. We're communicating and learning in a 360 realm. And we are also looking at, like you guys said, with, you know, Snapchat and Facebook filters and Instagram filters, we're looking at this augmented reality kind of warping into our social interactions. But there's so much more to it, because as we look at this technology advancing, we're not just looking at AR as an independent, and that's a conversation we had. This isn't just an independent learning opportunity anymore. It's now collaborative, where we can actually get together with people from all around the world and actually collaborate in augmented reality at the same time. We're all seeing it together. And I don't think that's something that people really see as valuable as how important it is. When you're going into a real place, how do you interact? When you're going into our social media, how do you interact? When you go into a 360 space and there's dating scenes and there's sex happening on some of these different, you know, virtual reality gaming sites, I don't think people realize the impact that it has, that these worlds do collide. And it's important for our students to know how to interact, not just in physical and not just digital the way we've always known it in the past, but what is that virtual connections and collaboration going to look like even next year? Because it's here and it's coming fast and furious, and there's a lot of money invested. So one of the things that I wanted to ask Shapes out in Poland, thank you guys again for joining us, but is really like those things that are being collaborated to you, where do you find the challenge on the digital citizenship side? Where do you find the biggest challenge in making sure to meet that these kids are safe, but then also that they are given the opportunity to really flourish?
Okay, so it's our broad vision about collaboration in the classroom, but I think Mike will explain it a little bit better.
Yeah, like having the first thing about being a global community is staying here in in Poland and getting quite a narrow point of view is very limiting. So getting out there across the ocean to visit schools and see how things are learned outside of here. It's one very important part of the app developer perspective, and we wanted to have an even broader perspective with one of our ideas, like Shapes Labs, as part of releasing a lot of ideas and prototypes and things that our current tech can deliver, and having that voted and getting feedback based on that kind of instructions. So that's one way to gather feedback globally, whether it's from teachers or students, and based on collaboration. And one more thing about the collaboration, and not on a global perspective, but more on a classroom perspective. We've noticed that a lot of edtech currently being used in the classroom is mainly used in a, let's say, single player mode, without connecting with other students. And we've noticed, we all know value of collaborating in real time with others, and it's just like kids building something from together with Lego blocks. They don't do it like separately, and they do it collaboratively, and they do it together. And it's something we wanted to where we wanted to use AR and collaborative features to let them learn together in a digital space. They can share. So it's not only the physical part they share. They can also do it together in a digital virtual space. For example, like having 3 or 4 devices that are connected together and on a desk, like a shared space, they can build a lab together and conduct experiments or build stuff with shapes, with 3D shapes.
And Michael and Melina, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I already got the 2-minute countdown like 3 minutes ago, I'm thinking. But I will say that in light of our discussion and even just, we have time zone differences, we have language differences, and how we're communicating and how we really need to work together. And this is not a single company going out and saying, I'm going to create this product that's going to meet these needs. It really is hearing from all buyers, right? We have our student voices, we have our educator voices, we have company voices. That should really be the collaboration when we're looking ahead to how we are going to make sure that immersive technology hits home in the right way, effectively and really safely. So I'm going to go ahead and close that one out because I know we have the next group joining in, I think. Yeah? All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hang in there? So hopefully you're able to see from the classroom to the boardroom that digital citizenship is not necessarily unique to education. While it finds its roots, a lot of it in education, we see that digital citizenship as a movement forward really impacts every single facet of our life. Since we do have some presenters here who were with us, we do want to make sure that when up at our lunchtime, some of the folks who are our sponsors are here today. So we do want to make sure that we have an opportunity to give some love back to them. But before we move into that portion, does anyone have any questions for that you'd like to ask of any of our presenters while we have them here, for our panelists? Yeah. I'm sorry. Question. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
I think it's more of parents being afraid because they have been left behind this whole technology divide and they don't know where to go to be educated. I know when I lived in Atlanta, Georgia years ago when Facebook was really big with young people and the CDC actually had workshops around the Metro Atlanta area to educate parents about this whole technology boom that was coming along and how to get on Facebook and how to do things. And so I think what parents are sometimes looking for are places to go to be educated so that they can come up to speed with where their children are and so that they can also participate, because I think you're more fearful when you don't know.
So your question was, and for example,
where do parents go? Like what platforms do parents get on to be educated? Where do they go in the St. Louis, Missouri area to learn about, where? I mean, I think parents are looking for where.
Yeah. So I'll address this to Maria, since on the panel speaking from the parent perspective. The question was, where do as parents are fearful sometimes of the technology and they feel that their students are moving light years ahead, what are some resources that parents you have found? What are some resources that parents can access so that they can try to break the fear barrier with the technology that they have with their students?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that there are physical places to go locally, but the lack we have as parents is that internet provides us with a lot of online resources where we can read, where we can learn, where we can get tips from. I'm thinking in your country about Common Sense Media, about the Family Online Safety Institute, about the Digital Citizenship Institute itself with some of its initiatives. There are plenty of books written by people who've worked previously with the Institute, books and online texts that will give you tips as to how to address whatever the problem is or your concern. And we've got to try and differentiate what concerns us with each of our kids, because we get a lot of messages with the different concerns, but you may have 3 kids, as is my case, and I'm more concerned about privacy with one of them, and more concerned about screen time with another one, and more concerned about overexposure with the third one. So depending on what you need, there are a lot of online websites which are reliable, better than just Google, what can I do to raise my kids in the digital world? But, I don't know, I think right now about Deborah Heitner or Janelle Hoffman or Common Sense Media or Fussy or many different private and public institutions in the United States that have texts available, even in Spanish, for the Spanish-speaking communities. I think I would try to it's the same as when you try to improve how healthy your kid's diet is. You will look online for recipes and try to cook a new menu and try to learn new ways of cooking the same food. So I think it's trying to find what you need, but there are a lot of resources on the internet.
Cool, thank you very much. Good, agree. Thank you. Next question, yeah.
Quick question. I had 3 questions.
Yeah, you bet.
Second question is, thank you. Okay, so like I said, the first question was, what impact, if any, will net neutrality have regarding digital citizenship or anything of that nature that we're talking about? Second question is there any impact concerning, or any studies that's been done concerning how people will be affected health-wise? Because I know I've been seeing a lot of things online concerning smart technology and how smart technology potentially and immersive technology has the potential of having cancerous effects and things of that nature. And the third question is all of this technology that's being driven, is it being driven by the private sector, the government sector, or is the government going to be influencing any of this this technology that's going forth?
Oh man, those are all 3 awesome questions. The first one talking
Do you take
about,
notes? Do you take notes on that? Okay,
yeah,
good.
I for sure take notes. I'm like, those are good questions. The first one was talking about net neutrality and recognizing the impact net neutrality would have on the digital citizenship. Is there anyone from the panel? Just raise your hand if there's anyone from the panel who thinks they might have an answer for that one. You'd be willing to speak on that. All right, Joanne, we'll unmute you here. There you go. Go ahead.
So I can only speak for what's happening in Europe at the moment, and net neutrality is the principle that internet service providers treat all data on the internet equally and not discriminate or charge differently by users. There is a proposal on a legislative change in Europe that on copyright, so that the major technology companies like the search engines and the social networks that are gaining and getting traffic on the back of content being created by artists, by publishers, by the media, that they would get a kickback in terms of the revenue that the big corporations are getting. We've also seen the EU Commission and the EU institutions move on the social networks and the search engines removing content from the internet. The UK government are also moving independently on that as well. I know people fear that it might impact freedom of speech. However, we have seen people who have live broadcast terrorist attacks and murders, and I think at some stage somebody needs to step in on that. What I would say is that technology is moving faster than the legislators can cope with. If we equate it to when the motor car was founded, it took 40 years for the seatbelt to be created. Google announced earlier this year that we are only 1% of the way into how technology is going to change our businesses, education, and our lives. So I guess it's, just the age of disruption, and technology is disrupting it, and, people are struggling to keep up. But this kind of global community has a strong role to play.
Absolutely. Cool. Thank you very much. The second question, we talked about the impact on health and wellness of digital technology, whether it be, from digital radio signals that some people fear might be causing cancer, or how that research wraps itself up, how that research is done ethically. Is there anyone who'd be one, and also to anyone in the room who'd be interested, who has that knowledge, would be interested or willing to have some expertise to address that? Maria?
Yes, I think when it comes to health, the World Health Organization has a lot of trustful guidelines. And I think the most important thing we have to take into account is that there's still lack of real scientific evidence when it comes to all kinds of negative impacts of technology on healthcare. If we're talking about cause, saying tech is the cause of a health problem, it's more how it's related. It's a relational impact when it comes to tech on health. Too much of almost anything is almost always bad. If we're talking about joining this health, taking care of your health, and being a digital citizen, I think we're talking about balance and about trying to read things from reliable sources. So I would definitely go to professional healthcare groups and to, for instance, the World Health Organization, who says that scientific evidence is still doubtful if we're talking about cause, not just relation. I don't know if I explained that.
No, that makes good sense. Makes good sense too. I would probably say I teach at an ECE through middle school building, and we through some grant money had purchased the Google Expeditions virtual reality kit. It comes with that through Google Expeditions, and we have several parents who are ophthalmologists. And some people are saying, wait, what is the impact of having a device this close to my kid's face? Like, is that going to be impactful? And I'm really honest that every time I get my eyes checked for my glasses, I talked to those parents and said, hey, is there any literature out about this now? So is there any literature out about AR and VR and the impact that it has on eye strain? And so far, the thing I keep getting back from is like, just as one example of health and wellness, there is not, to date, there just is not a lot of significant research on it. It's not to say that there is or that there isn't, but there isn't, there isn't any more eye strain on doing things like AR and VR from a health and wellness perspective than reading a book. And that could change. And to Maria, to your point, as the research comes out, just being a good consumer of that research as it goes through. So as a good example.
Yes, and you also get a lot of comments from people, like when it comes to social media and mental health, for instance, and still evidence talks about relation, not cause. There has to be some underlying issue in a person for him or her to react in a certain way to the impact of social media, or too much screen time, for instance. And I had someone who approached me the other day and said, what can you say about Pokemon Go? Or selfies, people have died because they took selfies on a cliff and they fell down, and that's unhealthy. And I said, well, that's not the game itself. It's the person who will not look, where he's standing before he takes the selfie. Caroline Knorr from Common Sense Media was in Bilbao yesterday, and she was talking about this very serious issue of mental health and social media. And yet again, she talked about maybe relation, if there's an underlying issue behind it, but certainly not cause effect.
And as we kind of wrap up, as we're running short on time here, one of the last questions was, did anyone recognize a driver of a lot of the technology? Is there a profit movement that's causing a lot of the movement forward of technology? Is it government intervention? Where do you see a lot of the driving of the technology space moving, and who do you think is doing the driving, if I understand the question? Yeah, Joanne.
Well, I'm not sure whether this is going to be a favorable answer or not, but I suggest that the people who are driving this technology change are actually consumers, because we have changed how we access information. The smartphone was already referenced. It has 250,000 patents. So when I deliver Google's Mobile Masterclass, we actually look at how people are using the internet, and how consumer behavior has changed is driving then the technologies and the companies to implement new systems and new ways of working. There's no doubt that the Goliaths of the internet are also driving this, and the corporate world is also driving this. Yesterday in Dublin, we had the first self-driving bus go down our main centre in the city. And when the founder of that technology was interviewed, he said people now want to live and work differently. People don't want to be commuting to work for hours, because that is time taken out of their lives. And what we want as individuals in this digital age is that we want more time, quality time in our lives, for, you know, to hang out with the people that we love. So I think we are driving that change, and then the companies are just responding to it.
Oh, thank you. As you draw time to a close, if you wouldn't mind, do you just give a round of applause for all of our panelists who share this today? Thank you so very much for being with us.